And welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Showrunner. Very excited to be with you today. I am your host, Jared Morris. I'm here with my co host, Johnny Naster. And, Johnny, we are doing something a little bit different for
We
this
are.
for this episode, which anybody watching will understand what we're doing different. But if you're listening to the podcast, you may be wondering what we're doing differently. Johnny, would you like to tell everybody what's a little different about this episode?
We are broadcasting live to YouTube.
As we record.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So we've got the video going. Now both of us have, recordings going in the side, on the side, so we can get our own good local recording, but we are broadcasting this video live. Now, we didn't tell anybody about this. So as of right now, we have no live viewers. But in the future, if this goes well and we both feel comfortable doing this and the product that comes out of it is good, then we may do some live broadcasts for our podcast recordings, because we think it would be a pretty cool way to engage more with you, the audience, and just give you another way to kind of connect with the show and see behind the scenes with what we do when we're producing the podcast. Now, Johnny, I obviously do this a lot with the assembly call, because everything that we broadcast it to our YouTube page. So we do it live, and then we take that audio and convert it into a podcast. So I've done this a lot. Have you done any of these recordings for YouTube where the final intention is an audio podcast, but you're still broadcasting it live on video?
I have never done this before. And up until now, when you were asking this question, I had convinced myself that I had good reasons for it. But as you were asking the question, I realized that I actually just made up a whole bunch of excuses because I guess because I've never done it before. So I don't know if it was fear, or I guess fear of the unknown, and just like setting it all up. But now that I've done it, this seems like why weren't we doing this sooner?
Well, and we've done, like, inside the course, we've done Q&As, so we've been on video before. We used to do those blab sessions.
We used to do blab sessions.
I'm curious, is there anything different from your perspective about those, different from what we're doing now?
Well, this has a structure to it. Once we get through this intro, it has a structure to it, which the blab sessions didn't really. We would answer questions, and they were fun. So it's not the video aspect, but it makes sense because of the fact. Okay, so here's what it is. It's probably that I've been thinking about it from the terms of Hack the Entrepreneur. And with Hack the Entrepreneur, I do my interview completely separate from intro, outro, hack, and ad reads. So I guess I've thought like, well, I don't want to start doing all of that stuff all at the same time. So I just haven't done it. But with us, we basically do one take, and that's what happened. So it kind of only makes sense. And you've had amazing success with it, with assembly calls. So it kind of seems like a logical leap for us.
Well, and I will tell you, I do the intro is recorded separately. I do an ad read that's recorded separately. So when we do the assembly call, not everything is that is in the video. That's not the entire podcast. Like, there are still some other things that we add to it. So I don't think you don't necessarily have to feel like, oh man, like the video from start to finish, every single thing has to go in the podcast. You certainly have, a chance to edit. And once you're smart about it and you really know your format, you can really kind of stop and start and make it really simple on yourself for post-production too. So just something for down the line.
So you are agreeing that I've just been making up excuses. Okay.
Yes.
And invalid excuses. Fair enough.
Yes, but that's okay. But I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're doing it.
One more thing that I think, that I know I've thought of, and I'm assuming people out there listening are probably thinking of the same, is it's easy when you and we're both podcasters. We both have GarageBand running on our own computers recording this. But and even with you with the assembly call, you guys are all professional podcasters at this point. If I'm doing an interview with somebody who's not, I can't expect every one of my guests to get GarageBand, learn how to use it, and record on their end. So I'm wondering how technically you would go about getting good audio as well as good video, and like good enough audio that it can be used for a podcast.
I think that's a big problem. I think that is one of the limitations of the format that we have on the assembly call. Is we have obviously myself and my two regular co-hosts, And we have a couple other kind of regular fill-in hosts that have been through it before, understand how we do things, and so they can kind of pop in easily. But to have anybody else on is really difficult because there is a greater barrier to getting them on the interview as opposed to just dialing them up on Skype. So I'm kind of fortunate that I do 2 shows about that subject, about Indiana basketball. The other show, there's no video with that. It's all audio. So that's where I do most of my interviews. And then Assembly Call is kind of the same rotating cast of characters who are all comfortable with the format and understand it. So I don't know, for instance, for Hack the Entrepreneur, that I would recommend this for you for doing those interviews. But if you have a monologue show, or if you have a show where it's the same, guest host every time, or a small group of rotating co-hosts, then I think it's the kind of thing that you can add. And besides, I think the benefits of going live for, kind of going deeper with your audience are more meaningful that way. Look, I think if you did it for Hack the Entrepreneur and you had the chat, the live chat up and people could ask questions, like there are definitely some ways that the audience would benefit from that and that you would. It's just, again, the challenges of getting your guests on there would be so difficult on an episode by episode basis. I don't think it would be worth it. But especially when you have the same rotating group of folks, and then you've got this, a lot of the same people in there in the chat who were there for the live versions, it really builds community and continuity. And I think I have found that it's such a great way for your most dedicated audience members to kind of raise their hand and say, yes, I am all in with this show. I am right here with you when they actually show up for the live events. And it's like that kind of, you're giving your audience that next kind of level opportunity to say, I'm one of the diehards because I'm here live. And so that's one of the reasons why I really like it. So you just have to kind of weigh. There are obviously some challenges. You might have to, shave or comb your hair because you're going to be on video, so there's a few extra challenges. So you got to weigh if it's worth it. But I think for a lot of shows that maybe don't think about it or don't consider it, it's something worth at least giving a try. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode.
So up till 45 minutes ago, I hadn't shaved in 2 weeks. And
it looks good. It looks good.
I'll admit it did not look good before I had shaved, but it felt really good. It's still winter here, so it felt like kind of nice, but I was like, there's no way I can pull this off on video. So
I'm not clean shaven right now. But
right. So just quickly I don't think we touched on this. Just technically, this is being pulled off with a Gmail account or a Google account through Google Hangouts, right? And there's an option to stream straight to your YouTube channel.
Yes, exactly. So if you're going to stream on YouTube Live, you need some type of encoder. You need some type of program that will actually stream it. And so the native one for YouTube is Google Hangouts. So when you go in through your YouTube account and create a new live event, by default, then when you go to launch that live event, it will be from a Google Hangout. And the nice thing about doing that is when you set it up through YouTube and you create it, natively there inside of YouTube, you can actually get the link to the watch page before you go live. So for the Assembly Call, I set it up, the event up a week before. I get the embed code, put it on the homepage, and now it's sitting there so that as soon as we go live, it goes live on our homepage. And you can actually get the embed code for the chat too. So it's all right there on our homepage for people who go to the homepage instead of going to our YouTube channel. And you can go to either one. It'll be a similar experience.
Are we going to start doing that on Showrunner?
Well, I don't know, because here's the other thing is there are other ways to do it besides Google Hangouts on air. So for instance, you can use Zoom, and I think Zoom is great. And I would actually prefer to use Zoom as opposed to Google Hangouts. And with Zoom, if you have a webinar account, you can actually broadcast live to YouTube. So you can take just a regular Zoom, broadcast it live to YouTube. The only problem is that you can't schedule it ahead of time. So what that would mean is you'd have to get on Zoom, start it, then go to the watch page, get the embed code, and add it in after you've already gone live. And that's fine. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. There's just maybe that awkward minute there where you're, kind of scrambling on your computer to do this stuff. But it's not as ideal as, boom, we're live and this thing's already live and I set it up, a week ago. I have not, and actually right before we went live here, I was trying to find out how you embed your actual YouTube channel or your YouTube live page on a website. And I cannot figure it out to where it actually works. So if anybody knows, let me know. But I haven't figured that out. The only way that I've seen that you can do it is to create the individual event, and then you can embed that event. But then you'd have, once that event is over and you want to go to the next event, you'd have to re-embed it, as opposed to just having your channel up on your page at all times. That would be the ideal solution. And then you could use Zoom or any other program that you want, for doing this, for getting this interface that we have right now, and then broadcasting it. So there's a number of different ways to do it, but the native way with Google Hangouts is certainly the simplest. And if you're planning on embedding it on your page or on your website, it's the best because you can embed it ahead of time. So the idea for this episode actually came from you. We were talking about this a couple days ago, and you said, let's talk about tips for using YouTube to help build your podcast audience. So I came up with 3 tips based on my experience that I think will really help folks. But I want to ask you first, before we dive into these 3 tips, just on a basic level, your premise for this episode. So you said to help build your podcast audience. Would you be averse to me just saying build your audience as opposed to specifying your podcast audience? Or do you think that the difference is important? Because I will say that is probably one change that I have made in my thinking about the assembly call over the past 12 to 18 months. And instead of thinking about it as just a podcast audience, and then there's the separate video thing over here, obviously they are 2 different things, but I think about them much more holistically now, as just my audience, and there's just different points where people interact with the content. Do you think the distinction makes a difference?
First of all, I'm not averse to you saying anything, Jared. The only reason why I would put podcast in there for the showrunner is that we are running a podcast about podcasting. And I like to, rather than be vague, I like to be specific for our audience.
Makes sense.
I think that our audience is looking for a podcast audience, and 100%, your email list is an audience, your YouTube channel can be an audience, speaking can be an audience, and all of those can be driven to feed on each other 100%, which is sort of your whole full audience at that point. So the only reason why, which I always encourage people to do, is go more specific for your particular audience that you're working on right at that moment. And right now we don't have a YouTube audience. This is solely for the benefit of you, the podcast listener out there right now.
Okay.
To me, that's the only reason why I would call it that.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So let's start with the first tip. And my first tip, if you want to use YouTube to help build your podcast audience, is I think it's really important to be open to YouTube being the connection and listening point for the audience that you're building. And what I mean by that is that YouTube, if you're going to start broadcasting live and putting those videos out there, or something else that you can do with a YouTube account, if you don't want to broadcast your live video recordings, and for instance, I host the assembly call on Spreaker. When you publish on Spreaker, you can automatically share to YouTube. And so it will share the audio of the episode with, like kind of a generic Spreaker play page background, and it will go to your YouTube page. So it will technically be a video, but it'll be a static image with the audio playing. So there are 2 different ways that you can do this and put your content out there. Well, YouTube, it doesn't have to just be a connection point on the way to subscribing to your podcast. Like, you don't have to think of it as, okay, people are going to listen to me on YouTube, and then I've got to get them to go subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever you want them to subscribe. Some people actually will just want to consume your content on YouTube because they're there, they're used to consuming content on YouTube. They're used to how the subscriptions work. They like kind of the YouTube interface. And there are a lot of people who are there on YouTube, and those people might not even listen to podcasts in the normal way that we think about listening to podcasts. So I think that is the first important thing to remember about this, is if you want to use YouTube and if you want to make the best of YouTube, don't think that your only metric for success is how many people come from YouTube and subscribe to your podcast. Some people may just stay right on YouTube consuming your content, and you want to give it to them in the best way possible. And that might mean just the audio. And I know, some people, I've heard different people say, you shouldn't just post audio to YouTube because it's a visual medium. Well, that's true. But I know from my experience that a lot of people use YouTube just to listen and don't necessarily have to watch. And so I think that's the first important point that I would make is be open to YouTube being the connection and listening point for your audience, not just a stopping point on the way to subscribing to your podcast.
So as we teach with podcasting as an audio medium through Spotify or anywhere, is the goal of a YouTube audience to ultimately get them to your email list?
Yes. So, and this is coming. This is one of the tips. Actually, this is in tip number 3, which is, but it makes sense to talk about it now, which is know what next step you want YouTube listeners to take and use YouTube's tools to make that clear.
There we go. Okay.
So,
cool.
yeah. So I think we always, even your podcast is a connection point to something else, right? Maybe that's your email list. That's certainly what I would suggest. But if there's, another place that you're trying to send people to, that's fine. But don't think that you have to go YouTube to podcast to email list. Go right from YouTube to email list. And you can do what's called a card, and that will actually pop up a little message and a link while your video is going. And you can put, when during the video, you can specify when during the video you want that to come, and it'll kind of fly in, and, say whatever you want. Hey, have you subscribed to our email newsletter yet? Click here, and then it'll link people. It'll open in a new page, and it'll take them to that page where they can subscribe. So take people directly from YouTube to there. They don't have to go through your podcast to get there, though.
So I should have read ahead and then not necessarily asked that, but
no, this is probably the smarter order to go in anyway. So,
but I get it. They're not trying. You're not just. This is a platform of itself, so you don't try and get them from this platform to another platform with hopefully the ultimate goal of getting them to your site. It's kind of a weird, convoluted way, and really the ultimate reason also why I like doing this now that we're doing it, and the reason why I've always liked the idea of it is another thing we talk about all the time, which is being able to repurpose the content, because some people just love YouTube. Some people just love Spotify. And it's true. And so you cannot try and change those people. That's not our job. Our job is to give them our content on their platform and in their medium that they like to consume it. And to me, this is multiple birds with one stone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. Absolutely. And the other point that I want to make when it comes to, again, being open to, to connecting with people on YouTube is be intentional about building subscribers to your YouTube channel. I mean, if you're going to start putting videos out there and you're going to start putting content on YouTube, I'm not saying it necessarily has to be the number one place where you send people. But you shouldn't overlook the power of building subscriptions, because when people subscribe to you on YouTube, they get notifications when you go live, and they get notifications when you put new content out there. And it's really powerful. And so we've seen, obviously, a massive jump in our live audience numbers for the assembly call since we started getting more subscribers. And it is no coincidence. There's a lot more subscribers. There's a lot more people getting alerts that can then say, oh, all right, yeah, let me click over and let me check this out. And there are some really easy ways to do it. I mean, the way that you put a YouTube subscribe button on your site is really simple. You can go to assemblycall.com and see how I have that set up. Another great element that YouTube added is the ability to put a trailer on your channel homepage. And so you can record, a quick little 1 minute or 90-second video that explains to people who you are, what you're about, and why people should subscribe. And again, since I recorded that and it was really simple, I just, kind of sat down, did it in one take, just, tried to be authentic and explain to people what the assembly call is. We started getting a lot more subscribers, and now we're, well up over 1,000, which is really good considering that we, just got serious about it last season, and it's made a huge impact. And now our videos on YouTube are getting 4, 5, 6 times the viewership that we were getting before. For basically the same amount of effort to put that content up there. So, and I have to credit Will DeWitt for this, who started out with me as an intern on the assembly call, now works at Rainmaker Digital and has his own show, The Bears Brothers. But he, was kind of doing this off to the side. He was like, man, do you realize that, there's live alerts and all these things that happen when you get subscribers? It really makes sense to go after this. And I took his advice and did it, and it's made a huge impact. So again, it doesn't have to be your focus. You can still focus on getting people to the podcast if you think that's the best place to interact with your content. But don't overlook it, because if you're going to put content out there on YouTube, it makes a lot of sense to take advantage of the benefits that having subscribers is going to bring you.
Very cool.
So number 2, and I kind of bled into this a little bit, they're talking about number 1, but it's leverage YouTube's strengths as much as you can. So, and a few of those strengths I just mentioned, they make it really easy to put the subscribe button on there. They've got these tools like the ability to record a trailer. All of that is really, really good. But the other thing to think about is, if you're going to put it up there, again, at a minimum, if you just want to put your podcast episodes up with audio and a generic background, that I think is better than nothing, because you've given people another place to interact where maybe they weren't finding your content before. But as much as you can, remember that YouTube is a visual distribution channel. So try to take advantage of that. As much as you can, try to take advantage of that. So what are some things that you could do to take advantage of that? Well, could you add, if you want to do maybe a half hour's worth of editing, could you add some images to the podcast episodes that are in some way illustrative of the points that are being made? Could you add captions to audio only videos? Because that way it gives people another way to kind of follow along and stay engaged. And even, because I think one thing you find is if you've only got the audio, but you're kind of used, on YouTube to watching it and being able to see people's mouths move and see them talk, that you can maybe pick up on things a little bit better that way. And so maybe having captions on there will help people understand something that they may not understand that is a little bit unclear. Could you add a live element to your recording that provides a meeting point for your most audience members? I mentioned this earlier. We've got a huge live chat that goes now, during the assembly call. And it's like this secondary little thing that people get together and they've got all these other conversations going on. And I think it's great because I am able to see what people are really taking from our conversation. A lot of times they make great points that I will bring to the air, and it's really helpful, and it's great interaction during the show. And again, it's just another way for your most loyal listeners to raise their hand and say, I am really in on this. So are there ways for you to, I understand that recording live can be a little bit intimidating, and putting it out there live, you don't have a chance to edit in real time, and maybe you don't want that. So you're only going to post on YouTube after you've got the final product, and that's fine. But man, there are some benefits to doing it live and making it a meeting point for your audience, especially if you do it at the same time every week, because now people know when to show up, know when you're going to be there. And then the final thing that I will say about this, Johnny, and then I want to get your thoughts on it, is obviously you can put your episodes out there. And if they are, primarily focused on and, for an audio audience, you may not have a whole lot to add to them. But what non-episode content could you add to your YouTube channel? Could you do some tutorial videos that are keyword focused that maybe wouldn't be great for a podcast, but are great with the combination of a visual that you can add there? And now people searching for those keywords in YouTube stumble upon your channel, find this tutorial, get some help, and now they subscribe and get the rest of your content. Or could you post just some clips? Could you post a 1.5 or a 2-minute clip of a particularly exciting exchange in a podcast and just post that on YouTube? Because we know that with videos, shorter sometimes is better. So there are a lot of strengths of YouTube. And as you get more into this, as you get going, really think about what those strengths are and try to leverage them as much as you can. Even though your primary goal may be to build your podcast audience and you're thinking about YouTube from the standpoint of, how can I grow that? You still want to think about, what are those strengths and how can I leverage the visual part of this to help deliver a better experience to my audience?
That's another reason I would say that I've thought about this so much, is that I think this is a good jumping off point, I guess it is, for creating other YouTube content. Because since we're talking about leveraging YouTube's strengths, personally, I think YouTube's greatest strength is the size of it's like usage base. It's like the number 2 most busy website in the world. So there's no way, as much as we think that iTunes completely pushes, or Apple Podcasts completely pushes podcasting, YouTube pushes way more content than Apple Podcasts will ever push, I think. Because it's absolutely staggering the amount of people that look on there and answer questions. And even when, how you say, keyword focused tutorial videos, it's like when you're searching something on Google, it's the YouTube videos typically come up first now. So if you can keyword focus those, that's a brilliant way to do it. I think if you're like me, there's always sort of a barrier to entry to that, just kind of getting rolling, right? But I think if you were doing this like, you're already making these recordings, so now you're doing it on video, you're publishing it, you're slowly building up an audience on YouTube itself. Once you get 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 people over there, you're probably going to be like, oh, now it's worth creating a keyword, like, you know what I mean? The tutorial,
Yeah.
you're not just starting from scratch, you're already creating consistent content this way. You're spreading it out in audio and video, and now you have a reason to start doing more stuff on here. I think, to me, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be sort of that snowball effect. And I'm probably thinking that people listening might have, I'm sure we've all, as content creators, we've all thought like, oh man, I should really be utilizing YouTube, but it's a whole massive thing, it seems like, to get started on. And so to me, this is a great way to get started, and then to really be able to push yourself to leverage more and more the audience that YouTube does have.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And so the third tip here, and again, I mentioned this earlier, but it's know what step you want YouTube listeners to take and use YouTube's tools to make that clear. And that step probably is going to be the very same step that you want your podcast listeners to take. So whether it's subscribing to your email list, whether you're promoting a course that you have, whether it's your book, whatever it is, there's no reason that people have to go through your podcast to get there, right? They can go through YouTube, the same thing. And there's some pretty nifty tools, as I mentioned, with YouTube. You can do cards. You can add some intro bumper videos or intro videos and outro videos that can help make that clear. So find out what the tools are that you need to take advantage of, and then make sure that you are directing people to the place that you want to direct them. A call to action on a YouTube video doesn't need to be any different than it is on a podcast, except for the fact that depending on what you're doing with YouTube, you may be able to add a visual element to it, which can obviously help make it even more powerful if you're expecting people to actually be watching your videos. Where, for example, when we do the assembly call and it's all of us on there talking, I know that not everybody is actually watching. And I know this because I've asked people. And so, as you start to get more YouTube audience members, and if you connect with them, ask them how they interact with your content. Hey, I know, when we do those live recordings, are you actually watching, or, or are you just kind of listening? And I know that, some people, just want to listen, and they just turn it on YouTube, and then they go about doing whatever they're doing because YouTube is just how they listen to stuff. But other people are like, no, I like watching. I like, seeing the facial expressions and seeing the interplay, between you guys. And so if you know that someone's watching, now maybe, that gives you some more incentive to try and do something visually that'll help with that call to action. And, the other thing that you want to think about, especially if you're selling advertising on your podcast, you may think, well, I don't want to potentially cannibalize, my podcast audience, where I need those download numbers to grow so that, I can charge more for advertising, or so that I look more attractive to advertisers. Well, you can still run a lot of those same ads on YouTube, do those same ad reads on YouTube. And then I think, to a certain extent, it just depends on how you are able to kind of frame that to whoever you're trying to sell your podcast to. You can kind of frame that as a value add. It's like, hey, this is what the podcast does. And oh, by the way, I'll also do those same ad reads on YouTube, or this content is also consumed on YouTube. So here's this added audience that you're being exposed to, or you can, just describe it all kind of in one, depending on what works for you and who you're talking to. So again, that's another reason why you don't have to send people to your podcast, but you do need to know what next step you want your YouTube folks to take, and then just make sure that you're clear about that. And that will ensure that you are using YouTube in a way that will push you towards your goals, instead of just kind of splitting your efforts and not directing people toward where you need them to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So 3 tips for using YouTube to help build your, in brackets, podcast audience. The first one is be open to YouTube being the connection and listening point for your audience. Yes, ultimately you would maybe like to get them over to your podcast and subscribe there, but it's a separate medium where people like to consume their content on YouTube. Use them as such, and give them what they want there, not try and get them somewhere else. Then number two is to leverage YouTube's strengths as much as you can. It's a visual distribution channel, so try and take advantage of that and give people that. So as much as you can, just send your audio from your podcast from, say, Spreaker or from Libsyn, will automatically publish over there. It's going to be more beneficial to you and to the audience you're building if there's a visual aspect to it, because it is a visual medium. And then last but not least, know what next step you want your YouTube listeners to take. You already know how to do this because it's been rammed into your head of how to do it on your podcast, which is to have a very clear call to action and know what it is the next step you want your audience member to take. You might need to tweak that a bit for YouTube itself, but still, there's still going to be a step you want them to take and what you're sort of that journey you're trying to take your listener on. Rethink it maybe for YouTube, but then remember that the next step isn't to get them to subscribe to your show. It's to get them to take that next actual step, which is probably getting them onto your list or subscribing to your new YouTube channel.
Yep. And then I will just add as a bonus at the end, activate AdSense. I mean, you might as well run ads. And there's actually a few things that you need to have an active AdSense account for, certain things that it unlocks for your account. It's not going to make you big bucks unless you're getting hundreds of thousands of views, but it is a little something extra to help your cause. And every time I go into my analytics, because I always end up forgetting that I have AdSense on there, and then I see, oh, well, look, I've got like 40, 50 bucks coming. All right. It's just a nice little bonus, and it doesn't take very much time. So just activate AdSense. Because if you're going to start doing stuff on YouTube, you might as well make a few extra bucks while you're doing it.
So that all being said, as much as we said that podcasting as an audio medium and also publishing to YouTube are for two distinct different audiences, we will now be doing this live on YouTube. So is
this going to be a thing now? This is going to be a thing?
I think it should be.
Why not? I like it. I like it. I'm down.
I think it's great. We got our audio figured out, and I would like to encourage other people to take this step. I've been thinking about this for years, and you maybe have been too. So find somebody like Jared who can help you take that leap and get going with it. So we will be here. We'll find a set time as soon as we can, and then we'll let you know when that time will be so that you can check it out. But otherwise, we will publish these after the fact on the YouTube channel, so you can check them out as well and see what it is we're up to.
You want to hear something kind of exciting that has developed during the time we've been talking?
Yes.
We now have 3 live viewers. So I don't know who's watching live. We didn't announce this. We even have in the title secret live recording. But hello to whoever is watching. We appreciate you being here as we test this out for the live recording of our Showrunner podcast episode.
The ultimate YouTube titling hack. Call it secret live video and warning, do not watch.
Yeah. That's a surefire way to get people to watch.
It's too hard to get everybody to watch. Nobody wants to watch.
Yeah. But yes, we'll let you know. We'll definitely try and get a consistent time for when we do these. But yeah, thank you for being here. If you're watching live on YouTube, and of course to you listening on the podcast, we appreciate you listening. And we also recommend that you go to showrunner.fm and subscribe to the Showrunner email list, because we have a lot of exciting content coming there. And we look forward to connecting with you via email, no matter where you consume our content, because email is our favorite place and our best place to actually go deep and go to the next level with you and answer specific questions that you have, and all of that good stuff. So go to showrunner.fm, join us on the email list. And other than that, we will talk to you next week on another brand new episode of the Showrunner.
See you next week for episode 110. I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. All right, now here's the fun part about doing it on YouTube. So that right there was the cut for the audio episode, but we are still live on YouTube right now.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it can be like we used to when we were first doing the assembly call. We would start broadcast and stop broadcast you know, and right when we started, the show started, and right when we ended, the YouTube, you know, live thing ended. You know, it's like whenever you're kind of recording, you know, even if you're talking about subjects that you like there's still an element of being on. And you can be authentic, but still be on. But you're just, I don't want to say that you're more guarded, but you're just, you know, you're really into what you're talking about. You're not having kind of casual conversations. And so we would always, like, as soon as we hit stop broadcast, it's like, okay, you know, maybe we'd say, like, you know, a couple things that maybe we wouldn't have wanted to say on air, which is a little bit different for an analysis show than what we're doing. But we stopped doing that because we started doing the radio recording where we do it segment by segment, and in between segments, we'd kind of plan the next one. And so, like, our live audience, I think, has really gotten to enjoy the, like, seeing it when we're on and we're recording the segments, and then like the between segment stuff where it's a little more casual, a little more loose. We might, you know, indulge discussion of a rumor that we wouldn't for stuff that's going to go on air for the radio show. But you always have to catch yourself because, like, we've had a guest host on, who said something forgetting that we were still on air to all the live viewers, so we had to go back and edit out later.
Ouch.
But yeah, so we are still live right now, and we can obviously stop the live video whenever we want to. But
this is like the hidden track on an album.
Yeah,
all of a sudden it just appears. Everybody thinks it's done, and so.
And you could keep that in the podcast if you wanted to, you know, play it after your outro music, or it can be the little nugget that you give to your YouTube folks. That's what we do. You know, we kind of got comfortable with, you know, hey, you listen to the podcast, it's going to be very polished, you know, it's going to be edited, and the YouTube is much more free flowing, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. You know, sometimes people are going to have to suffer through 5 or 6 minutes of just awful banter that goes nowhere. But you know, sometimes you get some gold that never would have made it on the air. So, you know, but we try to be clear about that. And I think people like having the choice of which episode they listen to. So
very cool.
We'll see how that evolves for us.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right,
okay.
Well, this has been fun. This is good.
Should we say goodbye for real now?
Yeah.
All right. See you, everybody.
Take care.